Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, the man who shook the world with his voice and stage presence, stood at the podium, a far cry from the carefree young star everyone knew. Few could have predicted that behind the glitter and glory, a tempest of personal turmoil was brewing. As he recited words that celebrated his triumphs, a storm of past struggles and present fears raged within him. Born into hardship, Elvis knew more than his fair share of pain. His father's imprisonment and his family's forced move to live with relatives left deep scars. Moving to Memphis brought awe and wonder, but also fear and uncertainty. When he first stepped onto the Overton Park shell, the audience's eyes wide with anticipation, Elvis felt a mix of excitement and terror. Playing his first record on the radio was a moment of pure panic. Those early days were marked by a long, grueling tour across the South where few knew his name, and Sam Phillips struggled to get his music heard. The early 60s were a whirlwind. Elvis faced the dread of performing live, especially when Dewey Phillips was on the air. Yet he also experienced the thrill of potentially reaching millions through radio broadcasts. These contrasting emotions defined his life, the highs of stardom and the lows of constant struggle. After joining the army and enduring the heartbreak of losing his mother, Elvis returned to find his world changed. The shock of his mother's passing, combined with the pressure of his career, weighed heavily on him, but success had its own set of challenges. Making movies in the 1960s while the Beatles dominated the music charts was a frustrating experience. Elvis felt overshadowed, like a comic book character compared to the real-life superstars emerging around him. Beneath the surface of his dazzling performances and public smiles, Elvis's personal life was in shambles. His marriage to Priscilla was strained. After the birth of their daughter Lisa Marie, Elvis refused to have sex with Priscilla, claiming it was unthinkable to make love to someone who had just given birth. This refusal grew into a chasm between them as Elvis increasingly turned to other women, both in Vegas and Los Angeles. Priscilla, feeling ignored and betrayed, began spending more time with Lisa Marie and even started affairs of her own. The gossip was inevitable, fueled by Elvis's own brazen behavior. He openly admitted to having a bad marriage that allowed him the freedom to pursue other women, yet expected Priscilla to remain faithful and care for their child alone. When Priscilla finally confronted Elvis about her desire for a divorce, it was a blow he couldn't handle. His reaction was extreme, fueled by paranoia after a false attack by fans, which he mistakenly believed was orchestrated by Mike Stone, the father of Lisa Marie. Elvis's mind, already clouded by drugs, conjured up wild plans to eliminate the perceived threat. As the dust settled on his divorce and the aftermath of Priscilla's betrayal, Elvis's music reflected his inner turmoil. Songs like Separate Ways and Burning Love spoke of heartache and loss. His performances took on a somber tone, with songs and monologues that hinted at the pain he carried. The king of rock and roll, once invincible on stage, was now a man broken by the very life he had built. His journey from a poor boy with a dream to a global icon had left him lost and alone. The spotlight that once shone brightly on his success now illuminated the shadows of his personal hell. Elvis Presley's struggle with drugs was a major part of his life, and it's easy to say it was the main reason he was so sad and irritable, but it wasn't the only thing going on. His friends and family often blamed just the divorce for how he felt, but they missed another big piece of the puzzle. Elvis kept using prescription drugs like amphetamines and sleeping pills, even when he was busy with big shows and preparing for new ones. These shows, like the one at Madison Square Garden or his famous performance in Hawaii, gave him a reason to focus and take a break from his drug use. But as time went on, these moments of self-control became fewer and farther between. When new projects came up, Elvis found excuses to keep taking his drugs, and this made it hard for those close to him to worry too much about his habits. Joe Esposito, one of his friends, said they all thought Elvis would stop using drugs one day for good, but this rarely happened. One reason for this was that Elvis's business decisions often led to more chances to use drugs. As he became used to performing in Vegas and Los Angeles, he found it easier to get drugs than he had back in Memphis. Doctors in these big cities were used to giving stars whatever they wanted, especially if the stars knew a lot about drugs and could pretend to be sick. This made it tough for Elvis's doctor in Memphis, George Nishapoulos, to keep track of what Elvis was taking and stop the bad effects of these drugs. By 1973, Elvis had become addicted to Demerol, a strong painkiller, after getting regular treatments in Los Angeles called acupuncture. He also took lots of sleeping pills and other strong drugs. He even started using cocaine in the mid-1970s to mix with his usual drugs and amphetamines. Elvis made up reasons to keep using drugs, telling a girlfriend, "I need it," whenever she questioned his heavy pill routine. As his drug use grew, he became angry and defensive when anyone brought it up, especially those close to him like his father Vernon. Elvis's drug abuse didn't just put him at risk of overdosing, but it also made his mental health worse. Some people think Elvis might have been prone to depression because of his family history, and his drug use only made things worse. His problems with drugs weren't just about the legal issues, they made it harder for him to cope with any emotional pain he had. Before his drug problems, Elvis's mother Gladys struggled with depression. It's possible that Elvis inherited a tendency toward depression, and without treatment, he might have turned to alcohol or drugs to feel better, just like many others do. But Elvis's fame gave him access to more extreme ways to escape his feelings. To him, prescription drugs seemed like a better option than alcohol, which he saw as something lower-class people used. And these drugs weren't illegal, unlike the drugs he associated with the 1960s counterculture. Elvis's drug use took a heavy toll on his body too. Over time, taking too many sleeping pills caused serious problems with his stomach, liver, and made him bloated. These health issues were bad enough that he had to cancel shows and go to the hospital. But the biggest danger was the risk of overdosing, which almost happened in 1973. Elvis was found semi-comatose and taken to a hospital in Memphis. Doctors discovered his addiction to Demerol and started treating him with methadone, a treatment usually for heroin addicts. For a short time, he stayed sober, but by 1974, he went back to his old ways, using his connections to avoid treatment. In 1972, while going through a tough time after breaking up with Priscilla, Elvis met Linda Thompson, a young woman from Memphis. She was bright and lively, and she quickly became his constant companion. Linda took care of Elvis, nursing him back to health after his near overdose and making him feel safe in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. For a few years, she was everything to him, a friend, family member, and lover. However, as Elvis's drug dependence grew, Linda grew worried and eventually left him in 1976. Many of Elvis's friends see this as a key moment, marking a turning point in his life. In the 1970s, Elvis Presley found himself in a new kind of trouble. He had met a young woman named Ginger Alden. She was only 19 and very different from his previous partners. Ginger liked to play hard to get and used Elvis to get close to important people in his life. This made many of his friends upset. They thought she only wanted Elvis for his money, but he was deeply in love with her. In January 1977, just 3 months after they met, Elvis proposed to Ginger. She accepted, and they thought about starting a life together. However, Ginger didn't want to give up her freedom. She often wanted time alone and refused to go on tour with him. This made Elvis very sad and anxious. His friends, who were used to him having many relationships, were shocked. They thought she was just trying to get money from him, but Elvis didn't listen to them. Around this time, Elvis started worrying about his safety. He heard scary stories about people getting hurt or kidnapped, and he feared it might happen to him too. In 1970, someone even told his friend Joe Esposito that Elvis might be killed during a show. Although nothing happened, it made Elvis decide to protect himself. He began carrying guns and giving them to friends and family. Elvis also met a former police officer named John O'Grady. O'Grady helped Elvis deal with the threats by turning him into a kind of vigilante. Elvis became close to people in law enforcement and wanted to be part of the fight against crime. He was especially upset by the growing anti-American feelings in the country. In 1970, Elvis went to Washington, D.C. to meet President Nixon. He wanted a special badge from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. Elvis and Nixon met in a very strange way. Elvis was dressed fancily and gave Nixon a note through Elvis's friends, Jerry Schilling and Sonny West. Elvis wrote to Nixon, saying he was not against the government but wanted to help. He claimed to understand things like drug cultures and wanted to use his fame to influence young people positively. Elvis told Nixon he could be more useful as a federal agent at large, meaning he could work without a specific position. He said he had studied how to fight communism and the drug culture for over 10 years. Nixon, impressed by Elvis's determination and the unusual situation, gave him the badge. Some people think Elvis was just trying to get the badge for the fame, but it seems he really believed he could make a difference. Elvis thought the Beatles were causing trouble, and he wanted to connect with young people and guide them away from negative influences. His actions showed he believed he could change things, not just enforce laws. Elvis's interest in being a law enforcement figure might have come from feeling threatened by the changes in society during the late 1960s. The Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War caused a lot of unrest, and Elvis, who had always felt grateful for his success, didn't understand why people would rebel against a country that had given him so much. He saw himself as an outsider who could bring people back together by showing them a better way. In the end, Elvis's actions and beliefs were complex. While some saw him as a conservative trying to fight against the counterculture, he genuinely thought he could help people, especially young people, by being a positive role model. His journey shows how someone can be both a product of their times and try to shape them in their own way.